Hello and welcome to the managerial special from the On Sport podcast. I'm Craig Sarrager. With me as always is Mr. Daniel Cody. Today we are talking about Millwall. I think it's probably the first time we've done a managerial special on Millwall, considering the manager they've had. They have sacked Gary Rowtt after nearly 4 years in charge and have hired Joe Edwards as their new head coach. So let's start off with the previous manager in Gary Rowett. Just under a 4-year anniversary, 196 games in charge at Millwall, a win percentage of 38%. Obviously, one of the longest serving managers in not only in the Championship but in the EFL. Are you surprised that he's been given the sack?
Yeah, I mean, officially it's a mutual consent, isn't it? But I think we're in agreement that it's probably a sacking. And I wasn't surprised that it happened. I was kind of surprised at the timing because Gary Rowett, I don't think there's anyone who will argue this, generally has done a very good job at Millwall. He's stabilised them. He's had them competing probably slightly above their budget for some time. And even last year in particular, people were absolutely petrified when they lost the likes of Jed Wallace or whatever. He'd been a star for years. And it didn't even look like he'd gone because they're bringing Zian Fleming. There's no difference. So overall, he's done a great job. What I'm surprised at is that it's happened now because we all saw the end of last season and it was, let's be honest, it was an absolute disaster and catastrophe that they didn't make the playoffs from half time on the final day. 3-1 up against Blackburn, to not make it in, to lose 4-3. It was catastrophic, wasn't it? Let's just be honest. And those playoffs were open. Anyone would have had a chance if they were in there. So I kind of had it in the back of my head after that I thought it might happen during that summer, that either he would walk or they'd mutually go away. I know there's obviously been some horrible stuff in the background off the pitch, tragic instance with the owner and that over the summer as well, which has made things more difficult for the club. But they'd started the season okay. The Championship table looks like a classic Championship table. They're 8 points off the playoff, 7 points off the relegation zone. It could go either way, yeah. But I'm surprised at the timing it came. As you say, 3 days short of his 4-year anniversary at the club. Really stable again, had been okay, and probably have looked a little bit worse and in terms of results since he left the club. So even hanging on until you had a new manager, particularly with an international break coming up after next week, maybe would have made more sense. But overall, a little bit surprised at the timing. I thought after last summer and the way they missed out, it would have run its course anyway. But overall, we have to say, and we don't often get to say this when it's a manager going out, but we have a couple of times recently. He did a really good job.
Yeah, and I think Mill wanted to go into a new direction, maybe. And looking at who they have appointed, it sounds like they've gone in a complete different direction, and maybe the style of Gary Rowett's football just went a bit stale. I think I said, as you said, probably there's a hangover from the back end of last season. They've always been in that top 8, 9, 10 positions and never really got into that mix of the playoffs. And as you said, it was very close to being in the playoffs, and it is what it is. It's happened now, but unfortunately, he's gone, and one of the longest serving managers has now departed, and they've hired a new head coach who's taking his first head coach role in club football, and that is Joe Edwards. A Millwall club statement is as follows. So if you don't know who Joe Edwards is, 37-year-old head coach. He was part of a youth prospect at Chelsea. He made his first foray into coaching with the Blues at the age of 19, overseeing FA Youth Cup victories before being promoted to the first team set up under Frank Lampard the first time. Edwards was part of his post as Thomas Tuchel took over at Stamford Bridge, becoming part of the setup which won the Champions League in 2021. After that, he moved to Goodison Park to assist Frank Lampard at Everton, but he has been in charge of England's under-20 side. He will be assisted by Andy Myers, Adam Barrett, who overseen the last 4 matches on a caretaker basis, and Andy Marshall, meanwhile, will remain part of the backroom staff. So Joe Edwards said, it's a really proud day for me and my family. Although I've been coaching for a long time, a lot of people will be aware that this is my first job managing as head coach. Throughout the years, at various levels, you think you would like to have an opportunity to make the step up. To do it at a club like this, to be head coach of Millwall Football Club, I don't take that lightly at all. I'm really excited. James Brilson, the chairman of Millwall, spoke of his excitement for the appointment of Joe. With Joe, I'm very excited. He has some positive ideas about progression we can make as a club. It was a very thorough process with no stone left unturned, and Joe was very engaging, attentive, and impressive throughout. And I felt that we could work together. There's more to the statement, but it's just too long. There's too many people talking absolutely the same stuff. But obviously, Edwards will take charge from Tuesday training, and then his first game against Sheffield Wednesday. We'll discuss on that in a bit. So new head coach, new obviously first role, what I've said about 3 million times now. People probably get sick and tired of it. Risky move, but other clubs have done this before.
I feel like not this summer, but last summer, we had a spell where every manager was a new manager for the first time in a head coach role. And then we've gone for a little merry-go-round as team panicked in the second half of the season. We had a little spell of experience again, but it does seem to be generally the trend in the modern day, doesn't it? And we've seen examples of it going both ways. He's obviously a very distinguished coach. And I think maybe the key difference to some of the other people that have been in this position before is that he has been a head coach at youth levels and of teams like England under-20s and with Chelsea's youth and etc. Because, I mean, I go back to an example with Luton with Graham Jones. I always use that example. He'd never been a head coach before. And the man management was the thing that caught him out. He was clearly a very good coach, but man management was all over the place. And that's something that's got to be right. And with Joe Edwards, you get the feel that that probably is going to be better because he's worked with people before. I know you mentioned the people coming in alongside him. You've got Adam Barrett, who understands the club really well. You've got Andy Myers, who's an incredibly experienced coach and has been at Chelsea had been at Chelsea for a number of years prior as well. So you've got someone with a bit of experience he can lean on, which I always feel is important for a young coach. And like you say, it's going to be the change in style as such at Millwall, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting to note we've gone from manager to head coach. Whether that means there's going to be a slightly different structure at the club as well long term, I don't know. But I just hope they don't drift too far too quick because, again, going back to a person who had a similar pathway, and in fact, probably the last Edwards who was appointed to a championship job, he had to adapt his style to a club that he went to, and they ended up going up via the playoffs in the championship. And you worry with Joe Edwards, if he comes in and tries to play the beautiful football that is so often desired nowadays, given that change that we just saw at Birmingham and the reasons for that as well, are we going to get to a position where Millwall have got a squad of players currently that don't perfectly suit that style? If they try and adopt it too soon, is it going to cause more problems in the short term? You've got to get through to January and then make changes. But I don't feel Millwall can just revolutionise their style straight away. They're great at getting their fans on board. They're great at getting forward quickly. They've got good dynamic players in there. We know Alan Campbell very well in centre midfield from Luton. We saw the threats that people like Fleming have last year. They've got hard-working strikers that will run channels all day. My problem is the squad suited to the head coach at this point in time? Possibly not. But is he going to try and adapt, or is he going to try and push them to his style a bit too quickly? And for me, that ultimately will decide whether he's going to be successful in the short term or not.
Won't be a manager special if we don't talk about Luton.
I've got to bring him up, haven't I?
Well, no, it could be the same as Nathan Jones. When Nathan Jones took over when Luton were in League Two, it could be exactly the same.
Well, ironically, the bookmakers thought he was going to be here, didn't they?
Well, that's why you don't believe the bookmakers sometimes. But even like Liam Manning, obviously, like another young head coach, obviously doing okay at Milton Keynes, and then fell apart. But obviously now doing better at Oxford. Obviously, he's been linked to the Bristol City job, and no doubt you'll see a video on Bristol City very soon. But it's another trend in the Championship at the moment. Is, as we alluded to straight away, is that newer, younger coaches / managers getting into these second tier jobs. And obviously, I'm not saying the old guard are going like obviously like your Nigel Pearsons and your Mick McCarthy's and Neil Warnock's and all that stuff. But it's a bit refreshing for the Championship.
Yeah, it's refreshing for EFL football because we are seeing different styles. I mean, I do have my reservations a bit because we have seen a number of examples where it's gone wrong, and not every team has the players that can play beautiful football out from the back and play Manchester City football, if you like. Not every team is capable of that, and it can be frustrating to watch. The amount of times I go to lower league games and watch teams get caught playing out from the back, it's just frightening. But it's nice to see that there's new faces getting in. I think we were all getting bored, as we've mentioned, with the years before, where certain managers got through 7, 8, 9 jobs, didn't really do anything spectacular, but then still got another one. So it's nice to see new faces coming in. We are seeing a bit of a progression, particularly with the young English managers as well, of people who have come through that sort of formal FA route. And they've worked in the England youth setup. They've been aligned to a Premier League club. They've worked in technical development squads. And then they're coming in having been classic coaches, if you like, working with youth football, working with people management, and maybe making them more rounded coaches. But the only worry is then, do you lead to similar styles of football all the time? But the thing is, we can't judge Joe Edwards' style of football because we've never seen how he adapts to senior coaching, and we've never seen how he adapts to having a squad of players that isn't his own and that has pressure on it to deliver results instantly. So there's not too much we can do to judge on that other than say that from the face of it, from the statement, it looks like they want to go in a different direction. They've not got the players to do it yet. But I agree with you. Generally, it's refreshing. And you'd argue quite a few of them have worked out. So as long as that's the case, then why not keep continuing? There's a lot of teams searching for it. And obviously, probably the Vincent Company factor last year was pretty big on it because Burnley romped the Championship playing excellent football. Obviously, that doesn't always translate to the next level, but that is changing the view of a lot of teams when moves like that work out so well. And a lot of those teams we saw at the top last year, you saw the likes of Blackburn nearly in the playoffs with Yondell Thomason playing excellent counter-attacking football. We're seeing now Leicester with Maresca, who learnt his lesson after Parma, but is an inexperienced first-team head coach. They're flying. Kieran McKenna at Ipswich is second, exactly the same in his first job. So it's becoming a trend because it's working for a lot of clubs and people are always chasing a dream.
Let's look at Millwall's next few fixtures. Obviously, the first big game, is the first one is Sheffield Wednesday away from home, and then after the international break, Coventry at home, and then Ipswich away for the rest of November, and then into early December, it's Sunderland at home, and then Cardiff away. That takes you up to the 9th of December. So a bit of a mixed bag of fixtures, but they're all in its way. They're all tough.
It is. I mean, if you add Leicester the next game onto the end of that run, it then becomes even tougher. But it's the Championship. Every result shocks us. We all get surprised. There's 2 or 3 every week in the predictions that we all look like idiots because we go for a home banker and then the away team wins 3-0. But Sheffield Wednesday's a big game. They're a side that obviously won their first game at home last weekend against Rotherham, but Rotherham were awful away from home. Millwall, after a little poor run, will need to bounce back in that because they don't want to be drifting towards the bottom either. And after that, I'd argue it's a relatively tough run, particularly looking at the table both this year and last. But it's going to depend on style. Most managers tend to get a bit of a bounce in the Championship, and we are seeing that generally, apart from Rooney at the minute. So I think getting through to January, it's just about being steady and stable. You're never going to get more than 10 or 15 points away from either end of the table if you're picking up odd results. So if you can get to January, get a few players in that will work with him well. You've probably seen that there's going to be links to young Chelsea players where he was a key part under Frank Lampard, developing those younger players when they had the transfer ban. Is he going to be able to get some youngsters in from there? He's going to have lots of connections via the English youth setups, whether he can get 2 or 3 young bits of genuine raw talent to come in alongside what is a quite experienced core to the group. But until then, it's just about picking up odd results. And Sheffield Wednesday away the first day is a great opportunity. Millwall this season have been a bit inconsistent. They've not won in their last 5, obviously, but they've got quality in the side and they'll pick up enough points for me. So I'm not particularly worried about them, but until January, I don't think you're going to see anywhere near the finished product or a particularly pretty one just yet.
So let's get on to our predictions for how he will do for the rest of not only this campaign, but maybe in the future. First of all, could he become the 3rd straight former England youth manager / head coach to take a team up via the playoffs? Steve Cooper, Rob Edwards, the previous 2. But how do you see him do for the rest of the season and beyond?
Well, firstly, lovely stat. We get accused of not using enough here, which is hilarious.
I just thought about it in my head. There's nothing on the screen. I literally thought about it in my head.
You just wanted to get another mention of Luton in. I know what you're doing. But
I said Rob Edwards. I didn't say Luton.
Millwall generally have been hard to beat. So I could see them potentially being one of those sides that could be in the playoff mix. As we mentioned, they're not that far away. It's only 8 points. it's a bit ironic with them this year, really. It's the home record that's the problem. So I know we mentioned about the first game being big, but they've only lost one game on the road all season. They've got the third worst home record in the championship, which for Millwall is just unheard of. So that's going to be the big thing to address for him. Maybe they can be a bit more aggressive, a bit more attacking. And obviously they have had 2 tough home games under interim management. But for me, that's the big thing for him to address. Can he bring in a bit of firepower to get them over the line from January onwards at home? And if so, they'll fly up the table because they're a decent team. They're always solid. And I think they'll do all right. It's almost impossible to make a prediction on whether he's going to be a roaring success or not. The truth is, we just don't know on these occasions because he's never managed before as a head coach in senior club football. It could go horribly wrong. We're just giving an opinion and a guess on it. But my opinion would be, I think he'll do all right. And I think Millwall will probably be in that outside mix for the playoffs again. I think pre-season, our predictions, we both had them just to miss out again. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're somewhere between probably 5th and 12th, because you look at the top 3 who look like they're going to be quite a way clear of the rest now. And then after that, it's up for grabs, to be brutally honest. Beyond Leeds, Leicester and Ipswich, who have given themselves the cushion, I think it's pretty open. A bit like last year in the Championship. We all said this year it's going to be so much tougher. It's not really worked out that way, has it? It's just as tight. The Championship always does the same thing. And I can see them being outsiders for the playoffs. If they can add a bit of quality in January, and if he can just give them a bit of impetus at home. If he wins his first home game, the crowd will get behind him and they'll be flying.
Yeah, I think that is the most important thing, is the home form. And we know how tough the Den can be. But no, you have to obviously make it as hostile as possible. Make it that extra pointer or extra man for Millwall at the new Den. So, yeah, I think that's important. Get that form right again, as you said. For me, I think Millwall definitely won't go down.
Oh, God, no.
Definitely won't go down. I can see him being mid-table. I think this would be a rebuilding season for him. And then he could have a good summer. Probably clear out some players that obviously he won't see that he's fit. He might go for a younger player in the summer. It sounds dangerous, but it's not. And then rebuild Millwall from there. So I think he could be strong the season after. I think this is all about getting his feet in the ground and learning new bits of how to be a head coach and being that man in charge rather than being under something like being an assistant or part of the setup of the coaching staff. That is our thoughts on the sacking of Gary Rowett and the hiring of Joe Edwards as Millwall's new head coach. Do you agree with us down our opinions on the hiring and firing? Let us know down in the comments section and give us your thoughts on that. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast. You can follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, X, Instagram. We have TikTok. I'm sure there's one more. I'm probably wrong.
Whichever ones they are, they're in the description somewhere.
They're in the description down below. But thank you again for watching this, and we'll see you next time.